Congratulations, you made it to the end of the day. Some conferences, bring in people like Bill Clinton for the last session to keep you interested. You got us, so good luck with that. We're going to continue with some of the themes that have been extending throughout the day, but with a little bit of a twist, I hope, to keep things energetic and lively. We're in a time today where there is insatiable demand for compute power. We're in a mega trend, I guess you would say. Bitcoin is the world's most liquid form of compute, Bitcoin mining as the generator of it. But we can't ignore this AI HPC trend, the large language models that are being developed around the world, creating a demand again for more compute that seems unquenchable. So we need to think about where this is leading us. We've got a great panel. I think we've got a huge advantage with this panel. We often see 3 or 4 miners answering questions, trying to suggest who is the best. I think we answered that one. It's clearly TeraWulf. And
I think my job's done.
We've got a great manufacturer and a great interlocutor and broker to help us elevate the discussion. Perhaps just a few brief words of introduction before we kick off. Start with myself. Jeremy Sewell. I'm an advisor in the private equity space, in the data center and AI HPC Bitcoin mining space. For my sins, I was CFO of Bitfury back in the day, which many people perhaps in the room may remember the old B8 miner in the days where some of the vendors of that time weren't quite so large, but different time, different day. Taras.
Hey, thanks for making it to the last panel. Kulyk, CEO, co-founder of Synteq Digital. We are a distributor, services, and partner to many data center companies, many public ones, including TeraWulf, they're a fantastic company, Core Scientific, and we're obviously BITMAIN's North American distributor. We're really happy to be here and love supporting the AIM Summit.
Yeah, thank you all for sticking with us here. Nazar, co-founder, COO, and CTO of TeraWulf. We've been mining since 2018. Prior to that, for 20 plus years, we were in the power generation business. We were developing, building, operating power generation facilities in the United States as well as overseas jurisdictions. And we've been building TeraWulf up, and we're a Bitcoin miner with also capacity for the AI HPC market.
Thank you. I'm Irene, VP of Mining at BITMAIN. This is my 8th year in this industry, and our obligation is to provide the best and most profitable solutions for all of our clients. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So let's start with what's facing us, I think, and has been discussed at some length throughout the panel sessions today. But let's get into how can AI and Bitcoin mining converge and sit together? And perhaps the first question to you, Nazar, is does all HPC AI data center have to be tier 3 compliant? Do we need that full level of redundancy, or are we overbuilding?
My own personal opinion is that every single megawatt of incremental kind of AI load, will not have kind of full redundancy and backup from a power source. And so to meet tier 3, to meet full tier 3 standards, you needed to have a 72-hour backup for power. And so I find it both economically infeasible, physically not likely, and regulatorily extremely challenging that every single megawatt of incremental kind of AI HPC demand will have that kind of a backup. So the question now becomes, how much of it will have that, and who will accept not taking that? And so if you think about just the overall cost of building an AI HPC data center, people use numbers like $10 million, $12 million a megawatt. and for a full tier 3 kind of a data center. Embedded within that number is about $2 to $3 million for diesel generator backups. And so these backups usually run, I tell people, most of the time they run on an annual basis for testing to make sure that they can run when they need to be called upon, and they actually aren't used. And so is it really worth spending 25% of your infrastructure CapEx to build this redundancy over a 10-year contract? And who's going to pay for that? Again, we're coming from an environment where people say, we need the power, we'll cover that at any cost, we just need it. But as a long-term business, I don't think that makes much sense. And so the data centers that we're building do not have that kind of diesel generator backups. That being said, our site has 2 separate and distinct 345 kV lines. And so for those that are not familiar with the grid infrastructure, 345 kV line is kind of like a highway of power. So in the state of New York, there's kind of 2 lines that feed that power, and we sit connected to them. And so it's highly unlikely we'll lose power. So long way of answering your question, Jeremy. I think, I think that concept of a tier 3 data center will be met, for everything but this kind of diesel generator backup.
And I guess for you, Irene, and I think you might have mentioned this in a discussion we had earlier, are you seeing any projects where, HPC and mining, are being built within the same site, within the same infrastructure? What are your thoughts on this?
As what I introduced just now in our presentation, we have the demands, first of all, from our clients who want to have U-form factor miners to ensure they can integrate with their existing traditional standard AI data centers so that they can utilize that. At the meantime, we work with one of the largest public mining companies to develop their future infrastructure, which can be seamlessly integrated their mining business with the traditional data center business.
And I guess a related question, I think we'll start with you, Taras, on this one. We saw in Irene's presentation, we have the and let me get the name right, U3S21EXPH,
Yep.
which I'm going to call the Beast, and trademark it and sell that to you, Irene, after the show. But as we move to this form factor, which is, in a standard 48U rack, that's 180 kilowatts of load per rack, which is hugely dense. And that's getting into the realm, or beyond the realms of current HPC. You're looking at the buyers and sellers in this space. How do you see this changing the market?
Well, this is where I think Bitcoin miners, in particular, from an engineering perspective, were cool before it was cool. Specifically from an energy density perspective, I think that NVIDIA, in its energy density forecasts that are approaching Bitcoin mining, are giving operating teams like Nazar, like Core Scientific, Bitfarms, Jeffrey Lucas alluded to it earlier, and others in the market, an advantage over existing HPC engineers. And the reason being is because we've already managed massive loads of electricity for the last 4 or 5 years that we've scaled up as an industry. Unfortunately, hyperscalers and existing HPC operators don't have this experience. So one of the things that we're seeing is that there is a transition or an expansion of operations within the Bitcoin mining ecosystem to include additional HPC load. And I think that the existing Bitcoin miners, the ones that will be successful, are going to be targets over the next 3 to 4 years by large-scale HPC operators to acquire really the operating teams, the infrastructure, obviously, and the access to power. We're seeing this slightly now on a competition basis for PPAs, power purchasing agreements in different jurisdictions globally, but I think it'll happen on an asset basis within the next 3 to 4 years for sure.
Yep. Nazar, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, a couple things to add to what Ross said. I think when you look at what Bitcoin miners have been doing, that is of value to the HPC space. There's what Ross mentioned just around the the density and being able to manage and think through and come up with solutions. And I think that's an underappreciated concept. And the data centers that we're building today for AI have not been built. If you look at a traditional data center, it's 20 kilowatts, per rack, which is very different than what we're looking to build. And so I tell people there's going to be a tremendous amount of discovery over the next 12 months on what a data center should look like. We're all solving for a GPU called the GB200, which is actually no one's hands today. We've got specs from NVIDIA, but we're all designing and building for something that's coming. And so how that's going to work and how efficient we're going to be is yet to be seen. And so that's whether you're the biggest, kind of data center REIT, or if you're one of us, we're all kind of in the same pool. So no one really has a meaningful advantage in that. So I think, and to Taras's point, we've been kind of fighting with that and dealing with that with the lowest possible cost. And now we actually have a lot more money to spend. And the other thing is, when you look at on a per kilowatt basis, the infrastructure that we built for Bitcoin mining has been around $500 per kW for us. And I think the peers are, somewhere in that vicinity as well. We're targeting $6,000 to $7,000 a kilowatt for AI. So it's just a fundamentally different building. But again, we have a lot more, I think, mechanical power to kind of address some of these issues. And so in some sense, we have more tools in addressing this than we did when we were solving for Bitcoin mining only. That's one. I think the second is, from a power perspective, again, the traditional data center operators used to, further away, okay, sorry about that. Traditional data center operators used to basically get a letter from the utility saying you have 20 or 40 megawatts of power. And their job with respect to energy was done. The utility would deliver them power, they would pay whatever it was for the cost of power, and that was that. Now, if you're really going to put 200, 300, 400, 500 megawatts of load onto the grid at a single point, you have a far more interactive relationship with your utility and with your grid operator. So how your load behaves becomes very important for that grid operator and that utility. And having them have a very clear understanding of how you're going to operate the load is important. And so you're already seeing this. If you pick up any utilities kind of long-term forecast, and all these utilities put out forecasts for 5 or 10 years, all of them will always mention some sort of kind of demand response and flexible load as a way that they're going to balance the grid. And so Bitcoin miners have been doing that now for 4 or 5 years plus, in educating these grid operators and these utilities around what that means, what it can be done, and also kind of demonstrating in real time and actually doing it. So we've been able to develop kind of a rapport with these utilities around how this is going to work. And so this is something that the traditional data center operators have not done. They haven't had to do it. So again, this is another area I think is meaningfully underappreciated from an investor base is that, again, if you really believe that these loads are going to be hundreds of megawatts at a single spot, it's a very different than what the traditional operators have been doing in kind of procuring power. So I think both of those factors make me excited about where we sit and our ability to really kind of attract and land some of the highest quality customers in that space.
One other thing I'd like to add to Nazar's points is that something we talked about this morning on a different panel is that cost of capital is changing materially for Bitcoin miners versus HPC data center operators. And that's really going to be a competitive advantage as Bitcoin miners start getting cost of capital that's as low as or as competitive as existing HPC operators, where right now Bitcoin mining, if you're looking for debt or any type of capital, you're probably looking at like a 20%, if not a little bit more expensive cost of capital. If you're looking at an HPC data center at scale, you could probably borrow it at anywhere from 11 to 12%. So that in itself will make these operations slightly more economically viable over the long term. And to me, as someone that provides support services for this entire ecosystem, ensures that we have a very healthy, economically strong, and viable ecosystem into the future.
I guess a question for you, Irene. As AI, HPC, Bitcoin mining continues to converge, in what you're seeing in your roadmap of product development, where do you see things moving between air-cooled, immersion-cooled, and direct-to-chip cooled technology? Do you see that changing? Is there going to be a winner? I mean, we're getting denser and denser, which makes perhaps air cooling a little less likely to be the winner as we go really, really dense in terms of these technologies. What are you seeing that you're allowed to tell us, perhaps? Or not, I don't know.
What's your product roadmap, BITMAIN?
So our current U3 S21 ESP hydro is actually hydro miners. And what I was thinking is, we all believe liquid cooling is the future for not only mining, but also is one of the most efficient cooling solutions for AI data centers. And we now focus on hydro cooling solutions. And maybe in the near future, we'll have emergent cooling solutions. But basing on what we build, we feel confident to integrate the cooling solutions of traditional standard data centers with the current hydro miners to be fit with each other. And if we're going to have some planning for emergent, we'll definitely, ensure it's proper tested and this is stable solutions to be provided. But currently, we focus on the hydro cooling.
I guess another related question, I'll open this up to everybody on the panel. We've talked a lot today, I think, about the different type of energy used in AI, HPC, and mining in terms of interruptible versus uninterruptible power sources. Again, as we see these spaces converge, and we get into a situation where people want to build on the same site, and they're looking to rationalize the capex for AI, HPC. Do you think we're going to see people exploring, the optionality of building a redundant HPC data center and on the same site have Bitcoin mining and potentially use that power line as a redundant source of power for HPC, where the mining could switch off and power could instantly flick over as a backup source of power for HPC? Anybody hearing anything like this in the marketplace? Is that feasible? I mean, Nazar, you probably know whether it will work or not.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some mix of that. And, my view is that every large load in the future is going to have some level of responsiveness embedded within it. And so when we talk about Bitcoin mining, it is the most economically responsive load that exists. It's all math. In any 10-minute increment where the block reward happens, we know our cost. We know our cost of power. We know our hash rate. We know the network hash rate. We know the price of Bitcoin. So we are, every 10 minutes, we know exactly what our economics are. So it's a completely economic decision on whether we should curtail or not based upon the price of power. So Bitcoin mining, I say, is the most economically rationable, reflexive load that exists. Will AI be that reflexive? Maybe not, but it will have to have some level of a kind of responsiveness associated with it. And to that point, I think every single large load is going to have some level of responsiveness associated with it. And the reason is that if you kind of play out, I think we've, over the last year or so, we've gone from a market that was generally in balance or kind of oversupplied with power to now everyone's saying we're short on power. And so you're hearing announcements, we're going to restart, nuclear plants that were shut down, we're going to build new gas plants, and that's a response to this concept that we're kind of short on power. And so the way to address that is from the supply side, add more generation so you can kind of meet the needs of the growing demand. The other is, however, is to have a response from the demand side. Again, the system solves for peak demand. Peak demand happens, a few hundred hours of the year. So by definition, the vast majority of hours of the year, the system is oversupplied. But that's not, the grid is built to kind of meet peak demand. So again, if you can now cap peak demand or kind of shave off from peak demand, the responsive unit, the extra supply you need is going to be far less. And so I think it's going to be far more economic and far quicker to have kind of responsive loads. And so therefore, I think the system is going to start to incentivize loads to be far more responsive. So again, having a super responsive load with Bitcoin mining, next to a semi-responsive load called AI, could that work? Yeah, maybe. And I think that could be beneficial to AI loads as well. I think that's a concept, that's an idea. We're kind of playing around with it, but I think we'll also just have to see in kind of operations. And again, these nodes and these sites kind of operate in the context of a much larger grid, and kind of what happens at our node where we sit, has different impacts at different points of the day, at different points of the year to the broader grid. So the other thing I think we'll have to kind of start to work through is that kind of embedded buffer at a site of extra value or not. If it's of extra value, we should see a lot of it. If it's not, it may or may not happen. So, I mean, it's a possibility, and it's something that we are definitely, spending some time on.
I think, AI data centers and mining operations actually can share the electric infrastructures. Well, it takes longer to build the AI data centers, but mining infrastructures is rather more easier, plug and play, and movable solutions. So but as well as you building the AI data centers, you actually do some movable mining there and generate profit while you're building a longer project for AI data centers.
Yeah, it's the off-taker of first resort, right? There's countless projects, I know of at least 10 globally, that they're building power generation to meet this forecasted power requirement coming up because of the data center load globally, where Bitcoin mining is actually the very first installed power base. And as soon as the transmission capacity is built up for the rest, you can actually remove some of that Bitcoin mining that's not taxpayer subsidized, it's actually put in by private capital, which is extremely important for a lot of regions globally. And then you actually have the transmissions lines built out to the population centers to drop the ratepayer fees for individuals and companies that use the power. And then you can have the flat, stable load for HPC that's put there for the next 5, 10, 15 years as we have compute needs go up globally for HPC.
I guess from a rack density point of view, just quick fire question along the panel, where do we think we're going to get to over the next 12 or 24 months? How dense, and this could be AI, HPC, Bitcoin mining, you know, take your pick. How dense are we going to go? What do people have to be building towards?
The Blackwell forecasted?
It's over 120 for Blackwell.
For HPC, and then Irene, what did you put out there? Yeah, it's 180, 170. I mean, and as time goes on, both sides will likely converge to a similar power density profile. We've got folks like Rosso here in the audience building immersion kit to make sure that we have infrastructure that's future-proof, because at the end of the day, liquid to chip is not going to be able to cut it when you're hitting 160, 170 kilowatt per rack. You know, you need immersion, single phase for the foreseeable future, but over time, I mean, we may even need two-phase, which is a very intensive technical process, but to manage that much heat for the chips to continue operating properly, we're going to need that over the next 3 to 5 years.
And I think, you know, that point that Taras made and the point Irene made earlier are important as well. If you look at what Bitcoin miners have done, in some sense, Bitcoin mining has kind of paved the way for a lot of the infrastructure. So that's right. A lot of us public miners are kind of being valued on the infrastructure that we own, our access to power. And so there's been a kind of a concept called time to power that one of the analysts kind of came up with. And that exists because we had a tool to kind of bring that power online and kind of pay for it economically, to Taras's point, without any subsidies. And so likewise, again, from an efficiencies perspective, when you talk about the quantums of kind of absolute cash that is required to support the AI build out, I mean, you're talking about, you know, literally, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars of CapEx that's being forecasted across the industry. And so these efficiency gains, when you multiply them out at that scale, add to a lot of money. And so I think, you know, a lot of, again, the tools that we've been working with are likely going to find themselves kind of present when you look 3, 4, 5 years from today in terms of what the actual kind of output looks like. So again, getting back to my earlier point, I think kind of the work that we've been doing, you know, the last 4 or 5 years, I think is underappreciated by the broader market in terms of what impacts it can kind of have as this kind of, you know, next kind of use of kind of compute rolls out.
Yeah, and the power sector, the power generation sector is not blind to what's been going on with Bitcoin mining and HPC ecosystem. They know that HPC you cannot turn off, but Bitcoin miners have become their new best friends. I mean, you look at what Riot's been able to capitalize on in the Texas ERCOT market, I mean, tens of millions of dollars because they're able to be as responsive as they have been. The other utilities globally are not blind to this. They are now realizing that we are their friend, and we are an ecosystem resource for them to be able to really build in and capitalize into their own future growth plans. I mean, right here in the UAE, they are looking at Bitcoin mining as a massive resource to their own utilities. So this is a really positive trend for us as an ongoing sustainability perspective for our sector, and that's something that, you know, I embrace, and we're looking forward to continue to expand as, you know, as Synteq builds our own HPC data center capacity over time.
Well, you're talking about Bitcoin mining efficiency, first of things you think about the miners' efficiency. And everybody is asking what's the roadmap of BITMAIN's next generation of equipment. I believe that the average mining efficiency for all the public companies is around, I think it's below 20 joule per terahash. And our flagship product delivers 12 joule per terahash efficiency. And in the next 1 or 2 years, though innovation become harder and harder, but we are likely to go into the sub 10 joule per terahash efficiency. That's for the hardware. But also, I believe as this industry becomes more and more mature, people start to develop other tools to increase the efficiency, such as the firmware and also the PUE of their mining operations.
I've got another question, but just a heads up to Rahak. Are we able to go to the audience for questions, or? Yeah? Okay, I think let's do that if we can. And we can turn the lights up, and anybody has a question? Otherwise, I'm going to continue. I can't see. No? No questions? Yeah, maybe there is.
Everyone's sleeping. Oh.
No, a little sleepy out there.
Hey.
There we go.
Question anywhere? No?
Okay, then final one from me is around valuations. As we get into AI HPC, can the public markets figure out how to value these, let's call them hybrid companies? I can give you a few examples, but Core Scientific, I think, comes to mind. Bit Digital comes to mind. We've got a lot of people talking about, should they divest and spin off some of these businesses because the markets can't seem to value the two businesses side by side. Is that just a phase we're going through, do we think? Or where is that going to end up?
You want to take that one?
Anybody got a...
I can pause it if you want. I mean, I've been spending a lot of time with investment bankers the last few days. And I mean, from like a purely capital markets perspective, pure plays are always easier to value. Equity researchers, if you're in the audience, I apologize, but they can be pretty lazy. They like looking at pretty clean business models and being able to apply like standard metrics to be able to say apples to apples. How do I value player A versus player B based on EV to sales, EV to hash rate, EV to installed capacity, EV to power. I mean, really, there's a few different ways to value, but I think that the hybrid players may start spinning off assets to really focus and streamline their businesses, just like we saw earlier in the late 90s and early teens. From a conglomerate standpoint, Kellogg's did it as well. That's a major CPG player. They spun off their different divisions to be able to have pure plays. And you saw a little bit of shareholder value appreciation because it was easier for the market to understand, and candidly, the operating teams really had a much more focused business line that they could pursue and execute on. But I'll defer to Naz on this one.
Yeah, I think in some sense the framing of the question itself isn't correct. And so we obviously get the question a lot: Are you a Bitcoin miner? Are you AI? There's different multiples, and at least how we come at the world, I think it's the same skill set. And so we believe our value is we can identify and build and operate energy infrastructure that can kind of procure scaled power at a low cost. And so how we're using that power today may be different than how we use it tomorrow, may be different than how we use it 15 years from today. So fundamentally, we believe that's our skill set. And so how we express that, may change over time, and the allocations of it may change over time as well. So I think, again, to me, kind of the framing is wrong. And to Taras's point, it's far simpler just to say, you're a Bitcoin miner, you get an X multiple, you're a data center company, you get a Y multiple. But again, I think it fundamentally kind of comes back to this. And so that's where it creates opportunity, because maybe some people maybe get more credit, some people may get less credit. But fundamentally, I think if you're focused on that underlying energy infrastructure, you should kind of end up in the right place. And that's at least how we try to guide our investors, analysts, and say, hey, in the Bitcoin mining, this is our economics. In AI, these are economics. But fundamentally, we're kind of maximizing the underlying cost of the infrastructure that we have.
Got it. I think we're just about to run out of time. Maybe we finish, Irene, give you an opportunity to announce here when you're going to build a GPU to compete with NVIDIA. It's floor's yours.
Thank you for asking. We're focusing on Bitcoin mining. We believe this is a very profitable business, and we can contribute a lot to our clients with our advanced technology.
Brilliant. Look, thank you, everybody. My thanks to this great panel. Thank you guys for surviving to the end. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.